You're saying take your phones out.
Phone free is the term we like to use for this initiative, rather than banning phones. So you'll hear us all night talking about phone and social media free schools instead of a ban on cell phones, because we really feel like what we're giving is a gift to the teachers and the students. Not we're taking something away. They gain better mental health, stronger social cohesion, and better learning outcomes. So, welcome to our panel presentation and discussion on phone and social media free school. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you to Orca Media and Annabelle, who is a student herself, filming us. And my name is Liza Earl Centers, and I live here in Montpelier. I'm a parent of a 12-year-old, 18-year-old, and 20-year-old. So a whole span of adolescents. And let's see, let me introduce the panelists. I will ask you to turn off your cell phones, please, so we don't have it interrupting us. And our goals for the night are to educate and inform you about what people on the ground working with youth are seeing in terms of concerns, or if their schools have gone phone free, like Harwood, what they're seeing in terms of hopeful outcomes and benefits. Also to educate you about our very local efforts here in Montpelier, what the current policies are and what those are maybe changing to. And also the status of statewide legislation to have all Vermont schools K through 12 go phone free. And we'll do a little introductions for 5 or 10 minutes, for 5 minutes, and then the panelists will speak. And I hope we have 20 to 30 minutes for questions and answers and discussion from all of you. Okay? And then we'll wrap up and give you next steps if you want to get involved. Okay. So Adam Sargent here has been teaching social studies at Harwood Union High School for the past 11 years. And Harwood went fully phone free for the entire school day this past August. Adam lives in Montpelier and is the father of 2 kids, ages 13 and 11. Jeannie Ellis couldn't be here tonight. She is a special educator at Harwood, but she gave me some comments to read. She's thrown her back out. And then we have Rima Carlson. She is a family physician at Integrative Family Medicine in Montpelier and has been there almost 15 years. She sees children and adolescents in her practice and is passionate about teen mental health. She lives in Montpelier. She has 2 teenage daughters, aged 17 and 19. And then Jenna Bravakis. She has been a school counselor at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier for the past 15 years. She lives in Montpelier with her husband and 3 children, ages 11, 8, and 6. If you know any middle schooler, she is definitely one of their favorite teachers. Yes, she's great. And then Mary Zentera has been an educator for nearly 20 years in many different capacities. Most recently, a trauma-informed special educator at Edmonds Middle School in Burlington. For the past 3 years, she's worked as a body-based trauma practitioner and nervous system educator. She lived in Montpelier area for 8 years and is mom to a 17-year-old daughter. So, welcome to our special panelists. And let's see, we'll hear from them in just a moment. I just thought I would set a little bit of context for why this is coming up now. I think there's a lot of studies out now about the teen mental health crisis. If any of you have read The Anxious Generation book by Jonathan Haidt, a bestseller, top of the bestseller list for a long time, there's a copy back there. But all of these trends, and I've printed out some of the graphs, just show around 2010, right when the smartphones came out, the self-facing cameras, and the social media apps really figured out how to make themselves just the most appealing thing, you know. And you just see the mental health charts, the rates of depression and anxiety go up at that time. I know that as a parent of 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, we had a lot of good limits on phones, and then COVID hit. And it was so hard because they were on the screen for their school time, and they needed their phones for that often, and it was their way to socialize. So how were we going to deny them that? So all limits went out the window. Welcome.
Thanks.
And so I think that was when it really sort of just went to, well, these are on them all the time. I taught at Palace Elementary 2008 to 2012. And my 5th and 6th graders loved silent reading time. They would beg me for it, and they would run to their little nook, and some kids would read like a huge book every 3 days. It was the best thing in the world. And I remember being at a U32 Nordic ski race and seeing parents and talking about them and their kids, and I'd be like, is so-and-so still reading a book every few days? And their face would fall, and they would say, Liza, once they got the phones, like, no more reading at all. And I couldn't imagine that just like 5 years earlier. Let's see, 41% of teens with the highest social media use rate their mental health as poor or very poor. 35% of teens admit to using cell phones to cheat during school. And rates of school loneliness have doubled since 2012. So there's a lot of concern around mental health. And in terms of the statewide legislation, it's inspired because we have had several schools in the state go entirely phone-free from the start of the school day to the end. And the official list of the schools following best practice, which is what Jonathan Haidt advocates in his book, where the phones are just physically not accessible to the students. Not in a backpack, not in a locker, but somewhere stored away or in like a locked magnetic pouch in their backpacks. So those schools are Thetford, Hartford Memorial Middle School, the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union, and Eagle Bay Academy, and the Harwood. I think Sharon Academy maybe as well. I've heard that. So, without further ado, I think we'll start with our panelists and just go down the line. And if you could start with just sort of 3 or 4 minutes of what concerns you about phones in schools right now, or what inspires you about phone-free schools, if you're at one, or the idea of them. So go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so Harwood Union High School, so we went cell phone free this year, and we use a system with Yonder pouches. So the students come in and they put their phone in a pouch and it's locked, and then they can put it in their bag, so they have it on them, but they can't unlock it. At the end of the day, there are these places where they can go, there are magnets where they can unlock the phone. And we have a real consistent policy about what happens if a phone, even a notification goes off, or if you see a phone, or if you see somebody with AirPods. We've had real good consistency with the whole staff being on board with this, and that's made it really, I think, successful. Just some observations for me. In the classroom, it's been really helpful. It's one thing less that I have to think about, so I find myself thinking about, I can concentrate really on teaching and delivering a high quality lesson, whereas last year and years prior, it was like getting worse every year. I just felt like I was constantly scanning to see if somebody had a phone under their desk, and it was just distracting. And I didn't realize how distracting until this year when I was like, wow, this is different. Like, I'm more present. And I also started to realize I'm enjoying myself more. That was another thing that was sort of just this fall. I was like, wow, this is more enjoyable because I'm not feeling like the cell phone police. So that part was a big change, and just the distraction-free environment. It's not nirvana, but it's better. And I literally have like heard like 2 notifications all year. I haven't seen a student phone all year, which is remarkable. There have been students that have violated the policy, and that certainly happens, but it's rare. Another thing that I'll comment on is just the classroom, the school environment. So walking in the hallways, I was seeing kids with like the zombie phone stare. They'd be walking down the hallway. They would get to me, not even say hello, not even notice I was there. And that would happen every day. And now I'm seeing students who are saying hello, good morning. There's this senior cafe where the kids hang out. And this year, all year I've been just sort of watching to see what it's like. Because in past years, it's been them like this. Maybe they're talking a little bit, but they're on their phones a lot. This year, not seeing that. I see some laptops occasionally. I've heard kids debate. I've heard kids joke. They're laughing. They're talking to each other. They've had puzzles out, games out. I heard a student read writing aloud to another student. That was something that I was like, I haven't seen that at this senior cafe in a long time, or ever. So those are all positive things. In the classroom, not in the classroom, in the cafeteria, students are talking to each other with their heads up. And I was asking some of my students just today in my advisory, just of their opinions, because I was telling them I was doing this presentation tonight. And one of my students said, I was unsure about it. Honestly, I don't really think about it anymore now, which is surprising. It would be weird to have my phone out at school at this point. She said, honestly, it'd be nice to check it periodically, but it hasn't really been a challenge. That's what one student said. Another student said, it hasn't been as bad as everyone said it would be. At this point, it's kind of nice not to have phones. Sometimes it can be inconvenient. That's the only thing she said. And another student said, fine, it's fine with me, and I don't think it's changed the social scene that much. But honestly, I don't think they realize how much it's changed the social scene. The social scene is better, the climate is better. And I think to myself, it's about like creating the optimal learning environment for students, and this is the optimal learning environment. If somebody were operating a high-powered drill outside my classroom, I would tell them to stop. This to me is the equivalent of there's a drill going on, and we need to get rid of the drill. And so those are some of my observations.
Thanks, that's a great analogy.
So, thank you, that was excellent. So in the past 15 years that I've been working at the Integrative Family Medicine, I've seen hundreds of adolescents. I looked at my panel today and I have over 100 right now, but in the 15 years it's been over 300, maybe more. And when I first started in 2010, I never prescribed antidepressants to adolescents. There was a black box warning for SSRIs for teens, and when I trained, it was kind of like, family medicine, you don't prescribe that, you just send them to a pediatric, psychiatrist. And I almost never had to do that because we had a counselor we could have people see, and that was about as far as it usually went. Their mental health. And I think Vermont is probably a little bit behind the 2010, cell phone estimate of when the mental health started going down. Around 2015, I started seeing adolescents coming in with more severe depression, more severe anxiety. We still had access to pediatric psychiatry then in central Vermont, and so I still wasn't prescribing psych meds for teens. Just before COVID hit was when it got really challenging because our only pediatric psychiatrist left town, and it was pretty clear that the mental health of teens had changed in my short time here. And I had to learn pretty quickly how to be comfortable with prescribing these meds. And then when COVID hit, it got much worse. In fact, I had one teenager that I prescribed Prozac, and he did have suicidal thoughts, which is the black box warning. And it was very scary for me. So I did, luckily, the University of Vermont and some other organizations give us training regularly, but I started thinking this is strange, and what's causing this? And then my kids at that point were in middle school, so we were pretty strict about phones. The middle school had hosted things that, there was like a Screenagers.
Yeah.
We watched that with our kids that we went to. We didn't even have a TV in our house until high school. They didn't have phones. In high school, we kind of lost the battle. And so I started realizing, my observations with my own children and then in the office, their mental health was kind of suffering. And I started to think, I wonder if the mental health that I'm seeing in the office has anything to do with cell phones. And I started asking at the end of my physicals every year with adolescents, when their parents weren't in the room, I would say, how many hours a day are you on your phone? And, they'd say, oh, I don't know. Some of them I would say, hey, can you pull up your phone and show me your screen time for today? And it was always more than they estimated. And typically, if the parent was in the room, it's always over 2 hours, which is 2 hours is sort of like in our template, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Now they've changed. So now they say they want you to have a conversation with your kid and have it be this fluid. But prior to COVID, it was like less than 2 hours a day was the recommended amount of time on screens. And we say not including Chromebooks at school or... So it's gradually gone up and up. Some parents will say 10, 12 hours when we're not in school, and I'm just blown away. And those are the adolescents that typically are really struggling with anxiety and depression, and it's hard to treat. Like, it's an addiction, and they've done studies on adolescents, and they found that the earlier you introduce addictive substances, alcohol, drugs, phones, which are designed to be addictive, we all know, the dings, and it predisposes them to addictive behaviors later in life. And so there's actually a woman, Jessica Leahy, who wrote a book about alcohol and did a review of lots of studies on adolescents. She works at up in Burlington at she's been all over the state, but she's an author and a writer, and she works with addicts, mostly alcohol, and does writing with them. But her book describes how all these studies show that the earlier you introduce these addictive substances or things, apparati, you can predispose them to being more likely to have problems with alcohol later in life, drugs, and so it really concerned me. And I, as a parent, have been pretty surprised at how difficult it's been for my kids to get, like, they're still very dependent on their phones. I wish they didn't use their phones as much as they do, but at this point it's sort of, they're almost 18 and we have to kind of let them figure it out. But I'm very concerned in the schools, if they are using their phones for hours and hours outside of school, and then they also have that time in school, what it's doing to their brains. And I think the other important thing to remember is adolescence, the brain is still developing until age 25. And so, and what Jessica Leahy says in her book is delay, delay, delay as much as you can. And so, in my opinion, it would be a very good move to preserve 6-7 hours of every day being phone free. And I'll tell you, we tried really hard in our home to, put the blocks on the phones, do, limited time, no bedrooms. We lost every single battle. And we did it all right, just like Screenagers told us. And, we took the phones away. They get burner phones from their friends. We put blocks on. They completely erase the phone, and they'll reload it so that your blocks are gone. So they figure it out, and other kids have figured it out, and they tell them. So, I mean, we've had discussions about these are the impacts, and I think it's really hard when the brain is not yet developed to have those discussions. It really needs to be, I don't know. I am hopeful that with having phones out of schools, that and having curriculums that start teaching kids the risks and the benefits of phones early on. I think, my kids' generation was sort of before we really knew how bad this was. And certainly there are lots of other factors contributing to mental health these days. I mean, there was COVID, which was really not a good thing for teenagers and just the state of the world. But if we can help with one little piece of it, I feel like maybe we could get a handle on things. I am hopeful. Every day I know that I remind myself that we planted our seeds. I talk to my kids in the office each year. I mean, it's only a year that I see kids, but I do feel hopeful. And even though it sounds very doom and gloom.
Well, yeah, so I work at the middle school here in town, 5th through 8th grade. We are a bell-to-bell phone free school, but they don't get taken from the kids. So they can be in their backpacks or in their lockers. We just can't see them. 5th and 6th grade, I would say that's generally fine. They have a homeroom. Most of them don't have a cell phone. Where I see it coming up is 7th and 8th grade. A lot of kids get smartphones when they turn 12, 13, and then they're in their back pocket and they're on vibrate, and they come out. And so in my work, I think of this fact that I heard a long time ago that like the single biggest predictor of an adolescent's mental health is a relationship with a caring adult. And it could be a coach, it could be a counselor, it could be a teacher, it could be a neighbor. So I try really hard to like have that positive interaction right from the jump. When I see a kid taking their phone out and I haven't yet said, "Good morning, Rima," and I'm saying, "Rima, phone," it's not the positive interaction that I want. It sets up this battle. A lot of kids are pretty good and will hand their phone to me, but some kids, it is a security blanket, and it is a fight, and I'm like, I only see this kid, randomly in the hallway, and I've only now had a fight with them. So that's certainly not who I want to be, and it's not the interaction the kid wants. So I love the idea of a pouch or kids leaving their phones with their TA. At the middle school, we start and end our days in TA for 7th and 8th grade, so we've already got the schedule aligned. And I forgot what I was just going to say. Oh, the other thing I think that comes up a lot is that it's an equity issue. I have so many kids that have phones, and I have so many caregivers that are very involved, and they're monitoring what their kids are doing, they're setting screen limits, they're taking their phones. But I have a lot of parents that don't have the capacity to be that involved. And so those kids are spending 10 hours, 6 hours. I mean, they're showing me their screen time, and it is a lot. And so those are also the kids that are pretty attached to their devices and are finding ways to use it, right? So they're feeling anxious, they go to the bathroom, they're on their phone, and they're on Snapchat connecting with kids. But that's not what I want any kid that I care about to be doing when they're feeling anxious. I want them to be finding me or Brita or Caitlin or another trusted adult that they haven't necessarily had an argument with about that device. And then I've been at the middle school the same amount of time that Rima's been in her practice. And I was the only school counselor at the middle school 15 years ago. We now have 2 full-time school counselors, which is wonderful, and a full-time social worker. And we're like at capacity. There are kids that have like really normal pro-social, I got in a fight with my best friend problems. And then there are kids that we're seeing just serious mental health issues, and there are not the counselors, there are not enough counselors in town to see them. And then also there's the equity piece of who's getting them to counseling, how are we paying for it? And I think there is a connection with the amount of screen time and the increase in mental health issues. So the other piece that also I think about all the time with kids is, as an adult, my phone vibrates, I want to check it. I'm like, who's reaching out to me? I can't, and I have a fully developed frontal lobe. I cannot imagine being 13 years old and having ping, 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 ping. Like my phone just vibrated and I do want to check it. But I won't because I'm an adult and I also didn't grow up with these devices. So Liza and I had met a couple weeks ago and she gave me this curriculum for kids' brains and screens, and I have a group of 7th graders right now, and I said to them, can I pilot this with you? And they were into it. But today we were just talking about the brain.
Oh, cool.
And they were saying like, wow, like the middle of our brain is really developed and we have all these emotions. And it's why one minute I'm saying, Mom, you are my best friend. And the next minute I'm saying, Mom, I hate you. And they're like, it feels so out of control. So that part of their brain is developed, but this part is not. And so that impulse to like when they're hating Mom to like maybe get on and send something, right, to other people or post something, that's not there. And then that's where the like embarrassment and shame kicks in the next day when they're like, oh my God, I posted something on Snapchat and I think I know all the kids in the group, but Mary added her cousin and she goes to Northfield. And it's scary for kids because the network is so much bigger. And they don't necessarily know who they just told that they hate their mother, and they don't actually hate their mother. And so it just is this worry spiral. And I love the idea of kids not having that worry during the day. We will take them from you. Our gift to you is that you get to be present with us. And then after school, if you want to be on your device, fine. I know some of them have parents who are enforcing lots of rules and some of them don't. But while you're with us, we're all present. We're in community with one another. And I really think of it as a gift. And that's what I want for all of our kids.
Hi everyone. I am going to talk a little bit about phones and their impact on mental health. I mean, that we've really been zeroing in on that, and I'm going to use a nervous system lens to talk a little bit about what happens in the brain and the body when there is that buzzing, when there is that drill. So we all have an autonomic nervous system. It is what governs our internal organs, our heart, our lungs, our digestion. We don't have to bring our attention to their functioning for them to work. And the same is true for the part of our autonomic nervous system that governs our safety responses. So fight, flight, freeze. That just happens automatically. We don't think about it until we bring a little bit of awareness as we become older, as our prefrontal cortex begins to develop. But adolescents, they don't have that capacity. So this part of the autonomic nervous system is just working all the time. So when the nervous system perceives a threat in the environment, whether it is real or perceived, and it can be social, the nervous system automatically mobilizes a threat response. It mobilizes to either fight or to flee, and it generates a lot of energy in the body, and this state is associated with high levels of anxiety, of hypervigilance. So if a student is going to the bathroom or passing in the hall or going to the locker and they get a ping and they find out that their text has gone to Northfield to people that they don't know, that can bring about this fight or flight response in the nervous system, which is flooding the body with high levels of cortisol. And this is happening at school. And unfortunately, when that is happening, that is reducing capacity connection with the prefrontal cortex, which is reducing availability for learning. So also, when fight or flight is perceived to be unsuccessful, the nervous system then engages the freeze response. So the freeze response is related to depression, lethargy, isolation. I just want to hide. I just don't want to be connected to anyone. I just need to be by myself to be safe, because these nervous system responses are actually designed to keep us safe. But unfortunately, when there is this constant drill that is happening at school, these responses are happening during the school day as well. And again, impacting mental health. So high levels of anxiety, high levels of depression, high levels of suicide. And the nervous system is designed to be able to move fluidly through these states. And the other state, which is so vital to being human and alive, is rest and digest. So that's where we have the capacity for social engagement. It's where we feel relative safety and connection with other people. It's where our bodies have a chance to relax and restore and rejuvenate. It's where we have the capacity for play. And we need it. And our students need that. And they need that throughout the day. They need to be able to not be on high alert, not to be hypervigilant. Again, the nervous system just doing what it's designed to do. So I really agree with what's being said here, that it really would be a gift to students and their nervous systems to have a chunk of time where there is the opportunity for social engagement, for learning these social skills, for being able to be silly, to play, to breathe. And I have a 17-year-old daughter, and sadly have witnessed her journey with her phone. We have a divorced household, and I can only do what I can do in my household, and don't have control beyond that. And she's actually a student now at Thetford Academy, and she is really attached to her phone like most teenagers are. And even she has said this year at Thetford Academy has really been helpful and a blessing in a way. It's offered her a break, and other students just a break and an opportunity to breathe.
In fact, WCAX, which is here tonight, interviewed students at Thetford, and the principal said one student who was really opposed to this policy in the very first week told the principal, I can actually breathe during the school day. And I think maybe one of the reasons we don't quite understand that fight or flight mode is, I don't know about you all, I get maybe like 15 texts a day, maybe like 20 on a busy day, but the average teenager gets 237 texts or notifications a day. And that's the average. The upper limits were 4,500. Can you imagine? That's like a full-time job to respond to that.
See how many minutes are there in a day.
Yeah.
It's like one a minute.
My daughter is 12 and she does not have a smartphone, but sometimes she uses my phone to be part of a summer camp text thread or something. And last week, I plugged my phone in downstairs for the night at 10 p.m. and I got up at 6:30 in the morning and I had 53 text messages. And I just got this panic. Like, I don't have time to read through these and answer these. And one comment from a student whose school was going to go phone free was like, I'm going to have so many texts to answer at the end of the day. But the teacher pointed out, most of your friends are also without their phones. And we were, oh, right. So they won't be texting me either. Jenna, will you say, I loved hearing you say, like, who are the biggest culprits of students getting texts during the days, weren't you saying?
Well, the kids always tell me, it's my mom, it's my mom. And I'm like, why is your mom texting you? But that is, and I'm like, your mother can call me. She's got the direct line to the school. I always say to kids, your caregivers can reach us. They can call the main office and we will find you. In fact, one time, I am terrible at having my phone on me. It's often in my desk with a slew of phones that I've collected from our 8th graders. And one of my kids was sick at the elementary school, and the nurse called my cell phone. I didn't answer. She called my desk. I did not answer because I was on a walk with a kid. Then she called our school nurse, who radioed me, and I was at Union within like 15 minutes. So we're good at tracking people down.
Yes. And sometimes I've heard from teachers, it's just like, did you remember to feed the cat, right? It's not urgent to interrupt their socializing or they're paying attention to a lesson. Either just feed the cat extra or wait until the cat gets home,
Yeah.
right? And there is a lot to students having 6 hours a day of their parent not being in touch with them, I imagine, right?
Well, I also just think about it like from a lens of like frustration tolerance or like growth. And like, we want our kids to leave us and be functioning adults who remember things without their mom texting them. And like I say to my students, by the time you're in 8th grade, I want you to come to your 504 meeting, because I can build a plan for you, but if you're not there, it's probably gonna stink. So I don't expect 5th, 6th, or 7th graders to do that, just like we wouldn't expect them to like go out in the world on their own. But to start to like remove some of those guardrails, I think it's actually such a safe time to do that. Like, oh, they forgot to feed the cat. She will live. We will feed her extra at dinner. Like, that's a safe fail, and we want our kids to have those little failures that we're not fixing for them. And then when they get to a bigger failure, they'll know what to do, we hope.
Yeah, exactly. Along those lines of parent nervousness, Adam, was there a lot of parent pushback? I hear from principals and school board members that they're nervous about parents really, freaking out at the announcement of this policy.
There were a few vocal parents. We had a process where we had a community dialogue last spring. One first in the school with students and then one with parents in the evening. And there were a few parents that were vocal and were really concerned about it. But I haven't heard, and I know my building principal has said that hasn't persisted. It was just something I think initially that people were concerned about, like losing that connection. But I remember just thinking to myself, geez, I send my kids off to Union and Main Street Middle School for the whole day and I don't have any communication with them. So to me it didn't seem rational, but there were some people that were concerned. And I know people are concerned sometimes about what would happen in an emergency, but then honestly it's much more confusing to have students with devices during an emergency and more problematic. So those haven't been an issue. There have been some exceptions for students that have like health needs where they actually like monitor their like diabetes with a cell phone. And for those students, there's an exception carved out to them, and staff are made aware of who those students are.
Great.
But yeah, so I think it's so doable, and it's such I agree that it's a gift for students to give them this gift of this special. You have this special time in your life when you go to school. It's limited, and to make that a cell phone free environment is a gift.
Great, yeah. This is reminding me that I said I would read Jeannie's points as a special educator, because there is stipulated in the bill, the statewide legislation and school policies that if a student needs it for a medical reason like seizures or insulin monitoring, they can have an exception just for that purpose. They're not in free period surfing Instagram, just because they have diabetes or something. But Jeannie says, the main point I hope to get across is that in special education, our primary focus is removing barriers to access an equal and fair education that students experience due to a diagnosed disability. Cell phones in schools present a barrier or hurdle for all students to access their education, whether they are students identified in special education or typical students in standard high-level classes. This barrier can't be strictly defined as academic. Our kids are in school for many important reasons beyond academics. For example, development of skills in all of these domains: social, interpersonal, communication, self-advocacy, discipline, self-awareness and reflection, self-confidence, emotional, etc. And Yes, social.
Yeah,
So social. And one thing that Jeannie shared with me was that 10 years ago, working with one of her students, who she said many of them are extra prone to distraction in the special education program, that she was needing to have them without their phone, and they were getting really worked up and even violent about it. Like, she was afraid of what would happen. And we're just hearing from so many teachers that they're sick of being the police. And so they're just not doing it. I asked my stepson, who graduated in June from Montpelier High School, how many classes are really phone free? And he was like, the first year it was pretty good, junior year. But by senior year, teachers just seem to not want to deal with it anymore. So only about a quarter of classes where we really off our cell phones. So they're in and out. And I know, Rima, you get texts throughout the day. She can attest to texts throughout class. And I put up the book back there, Stolen Focus, which is an amazing book of how we pay attention. And multitasking is really a myth for the brain when you're learning new things. You go deep. Even just glancing at a text about feeding the cat, like, pulls you completely out of where you're at, and it takes a while to get back into that level. So I think at the legislature we're hearing, Liza, we have to deal with education funding this year. We can't talk about phones in schools. But my dad taught math, 5th grade in Essex for 40 years, and he said, tell them this math analogy, it is one of the common denominators, like, to so many of the costs of, like, mental health staff in schools, of distracted learning. You need more staff supports, and the investment of administrators and guidance counselors about bullying. So schools that go phone free see a 50% drop in bullying. It's amazing, because they have their phones the rest of the day. I'm always startled by that, but maybe it's they're looking at each other more, and they're getting to know each other and care about each other. Let's see, People's Academy has gone somewhat phone free. They're not doing the best practice of phones physically inaccessible, but even with that, they've seen 77% drop in bullying, hazing, harassment, and bullying cases documented. It went from 9 in the first semester to 2 this year, so that's pretty dramatic. Let's see, about this school emergencies, Rima, I know you've been in discussions with our Montpelier High School, and so you've been doing some research. What do first responders say about if there were a school shooter?
Yeah, they're really pretty vocal about how they want the teachers to be leaders in that emergency situation, and the distraction level with 18 people in a room. And the teachers have even said, I can't even imagine trying to keep 18 kids quiet with phones. Yeah, we've kind of talked about it on the Caregivers Council. I'm on Caregivers Council at Montpelier High School, and they're thinking about doing the bell-to-bell phone free, and we certainly anticipate that being one of the concerns, because absolutely, for parents it's frightening, but when I imagine my 2 teenagers in a classroom trying to be quiet with their phones, I mean, they're just in another world when they're on their phones. They wouldn't silence it, and if you had, dings going off and a shooter out in the hall, that would just be awful, And I can't imagine how terrifying it would be as a teacher leading that group of kids. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say about my experience with the high school, I went to all my kids' conferences and asked each teacher, so what are your policies with the phones? And there are a couple of teachers that were like, it's not been a problem. For the past 10 years, I've had the shoe rack, and they just come in and they put their phones in the shoe rack, and that's the policy. The kids come in my room, they know they can't touch them, and that's one of the teachers that, is kind of the hard-nosed teachers. All the kids know that they can't, there's the line. And he's a great teacher. And then there's another teacher who's absolutely just as fabulous, wrote just the most amazing recommendation for my older daughter. And what he said was, I just can't do it. And I don't fault him at all because he's such an amazing teacher. And I think that's where having a law passed where it's off the teacher's shoulders and the amazing, fabulous teachers don't have to compromise their, amazing experience in their classroom from the drill.
We had the same challenge at Harwood too before we did the cell phone free school day. It was like, every year we'd be like, okay, this is the year we're going to really be tight with our cell phone policy. And then it just varied from instructor to instructor. Like some teachers were really good at it, some teachers weren't, and it just led to inconsistency. And throughout the school year, it just got worse and worse. And you'd see more and more cell phones.
I mean, I loved what you said about how you want to have a positive interaction. And
Yeah.
we found that with our girls at home. Like, it was constant fighting and, it was just so hard. And so you pick your battles, and I'm sure that's what the teachers do.
And it's interesting, the different takes on it. Our Montpelier rep, Kate McCann, is a math teacher at U32 High School, and she wrote a letter to the editor of the Times-Argus and said things are going really well at U32. And we have a letter circulating that is on our website, and we invite any of you who want to sign it to do so. We're at 650 signatures, trying to get to 1,000. And we have so many teachers from U32 who are like, things are horrible here. So it just depends, right, on your own perspective. One teacher from U32 said on lunch duty she really looked, and 90% of kids were staring at their phone during lunch. And cafeterias are quiet. Like, I've heard that the schools are like, the adults are happy to have to tell the kids to quiet down a little bit. I realize I'm looking at the time, so I want to open it up to questions from any of you for the panelists. Yes.
Piggyback on what you said in Jenna, I'm a social worker at the high school, and I think it's also an equity issue in terms of the social skills that we're inhibiting, and the kids who are really dependent on their phones are also the ones that are not engaged in sports or theater or they're not sitting with peers, they're in the stairwells, they're in closets, they're in bathrooms, and so it's such a crutch, and so they're not pushed to have the same, peer laughter or play. And the kids who have more carryover involvement are also typically kids who have, things to do after school, and they're putting their phone down at lunch for a little bit to interact, and so that's what I noticed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's sort of like we do school breakfast programs and school lunch programs to make sure every kid is having a healthy, meal or two during the day. And this policy would assure that every kid is having a healthy break from their phones and social media. Yeah. Yeah, Andy.
I would just like to piggyback on that and be curious, Jenna, as the school guidance counselor, if you've heard this at all. It's not like, even if you are raising your kid phone free, it's not that they're not affected when so many kids have phones. So my daughter is turning 12 in a week, and I've been doing more carpooling, and I was at state championships or gymnastics with her and all this sort of stuff. And it was so eye-opening to see, this gymnastics team with the other schools celebrating by all exchanging phone numbers and creating a chat group. Mm-hmm. And my daughter standing on the side, kind of just looking around as like the only kid that didn't have a phone. Or there's another example where there's a 6th grade chat group, and they organized a gift exchange around the holidays. And the kid who didn't have the phone said, hey, oh, what? There's a gift exchange? I'm so excited. They're like, oh, well, you're not in group chat. So there's this whole other social atmosphere that's going on. And when there's not a break from these things in the school, those kids that are having parents that are holding a line are now on the outside socially as well. So there's multiple layers to this equity, not just non-parental involvement. Those parents that maybe are involved and are trying to control this are creating and setting up their kids to have a social dynamic where they're excluded.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And so it's just so layered. And I'd be curious if kids ever come to you talking about
And
that.
if I had a nickel for every, that is the issue with my 7th and 8th graders that don't have smartphones and can't be in group chats. And I think I told Liza this, that I had a kid for like the whole time I've known him. It's so annoying. My parents don't understand. I'm so left out, and it's so hard. And like my kids aren't there yet, and I don't want them to be. I'm like, oh, I don't want you guys to get older because I don't want to deal with that. But this kid, something went down on his group chat that was like really terrible, and there was a lot of fallout. And he did say like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I was not on that." And I was like, "Put it in writing. Tell your parents." But I think that's a whole separate thing, really. That's hard because a lot of that is outside school, and it is so tricky.
There's also the aspect of mental health where kids, ACEs, childhood traumas, predispose kids to, addictive things. And so those kids that need the social connection because of their history are connecting with this phone, which is sort of putting them into a downward spiral. And I see that in the office a lot too. Like they're just treating their anxiety and depression, which is coming from their childhood traumas, with this phone that's just making it worse from the dings and from the, fight or flight. And it just makes me so sad. And then there are parents who come in the office and, very, very rare, but I do have them come in and say, yeah, so-and-so has a phone, they don't really use it much, it's not an issue, doing well in school, does sports. So, there are those kids, but there also are a lot of other kids that don't use it that way. And I feel like we need to level the playing field. So we're not punishing the kids that are able to use their phones. It's just making the environment, conducive to everyone.
Yeah. I've talked with a couple teenagers who say, I actually don't want to be on my cell phone, I hate it, but at lunch, if I'm the only person at my table and everyone else is staring at their cell phone, like what does that leave me with, right? And there are a lot of parents who feel frustrated about social media in the schools, maybe not in class, but sports teams is what I hear the most about, is that the whole soccer team coordinates every practice using Snapchat or something. So your kid shows up to practice not realizing it was canceled because they don't have a Snapchat. And so the second provision of the statewide legislation, in addition to kids not being on their cell phones at all during the school day, is that schools cannot use social media as the primary communication tool. It doesn't mean that schools can't have an Instagram page. It doesn't mean schools can't have a Facebook page. It means they're not having the student council kids during their period use Instagram on their personal devices to upload to the school page. The teacher could have an account and they could, work with that, but the kids are not forced onto social media because of the school's platform. And
Eliza has a question.
yes, great. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, yeah, question for Adam. About the high school, have you come across any legitimate glitches to your system so far? I'm hoping that the answer is no. But I'd like to know.
No, sometimes like AirPods or watches, Apple Watches. So sometimes kids can have an Apple Watch and potentially could be using that. We agreed, we talked about this one a little bit as a staff, and we're like, if you see a student who's like staring at their wrist kind of strangely, and then I think that might be the time, but we're not going to crack down on all Apple Watches. We just were like, it seemed like too far. And so that was an instance where we didn't do that. And AirPods can be tricky, but you can see the AirPods, but it can be tricky if somebody's got hair hiding them. The other thing that I know happens is that some kids don't put their phones in their pouches in the morning time. We have staff out checking, but I think sometimes students don't put them in. As long as we don't see them, I don't think it's an issue, but that happens as well. Yeah, I've seen some creative kids. I've seen some old Walkmen with a tape deck. I had a kid carrying around tapes, just to like make a statement. In front of them. I'm still listening to my music. You can't take away my music. That was kind of funny.
Wow.
But no major glitches. I mean, I think mostly the policy's doing what we intended it to do, and I think they thought we were gonna be able. They were like, the teachers will last 3 weeks, but we had resolve, and so everybody, it's been good. It's been real good. Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Jason Kingold, principal at Montpelier High School, who's really been leading a dedicated effort this year to investigate the phone-free policy. They sent a group to Harwood to observe, and a student committee and a staff committee, and some parents that go to every coffee with the principal once a month. And surveys, and it's been such an intentional process. Do you want to give any little update
Sure.
where you're at?
Hi, everybody. We intentionally really wanted to learn from Harvard, so thank you for that. But also Lamoille and Thetford and any other schools that are participating in this. So we, in the beginning of the year, had a student committee, as Liza said, and a staff committee, and our caregiver council with Jeannie Ellis, who's also attends. And so we're just trying to learn from everyone what they're doing. We got a lot of results back from our caregivers, our students, and our staff about what kind of process we would like. So right now, in fact, our caregiver council is tomorrow, and we have a draft ready to go about what we'd like to do for next year. And then that will go out to our students and staff and caregivers for more feedback, and then we're just going to keep building the system. And then we'll have some community groups, as Adam suggested, and really have it ready to go. My hope is that the legislatures do enact. It would be a little easier for us to do that when there's something behind it.
Definitely. The legislature says, oh no, the schools don't want a top-down mandate. But when I talk to school boards and principals, they're like, no, we want this to just be, this is best practice. This is a healthy school environment. We're removing barriers. That's our job. So that they can sort of take the heat from the minority of vocal parents. And it doesn't dictate how the schools would do it. It gives a menu of options that have worked in other places. The Yonder pouches is what students tend to like because they have the device in their backpacks. It's just not accessible. But there's a great video. We'll get it on our website soon. It's of a 600 student school in Dayton, Ohio. And they use bubble wrap envelopes like you might get from Amazon or whatever in milk crates. And it's just in the morning, teachers are there for like 10 minutes. It's like freshman A through D with this person. You know, they just all go to their person, they plunk them in, and then they all get locked up for the day. It's like no cost. And I was like, well, would teachers want to like go when they're prepping last minute in the morning, 10 minutes? I was like, well, if I was sick of policing kids all day, and this freed me up from that role, like give me 10 minutes to like plunk the phone.
I mean, we took everyone's temperature for a whole year.
That's
I'm
true.
like, I sit outside all winter. I was like, oh, none of these children should be alive. It's so cold.
That's a
out.
really great point. Okay, some real quick questions, yes. Go
I have
ahead.
a couple questions. When you say that for the high school, does that apply to the middle school? Would it be a district-wide
Right now, we're just focusing
on the high school, so it doesn't apply to the middle school?
You have to check.
So Geraldine and I met with Julie Conrad of the middle school last week, and we were like, do you know the high school is sort of adopting a newer, stricter policy? I don't know, are you guys thinking of the phones stored for the day or not,
I'm gonna push
Jason?
this back to Mia in a sec, because I think, Mia, I'm coming to the board, I want to say the April 2nd meeting,
Great.
somewhere around there,
Yeah.
to present to the board our rough draft of a plan,
Because
so.
it seems like your job would be harder, right, if we're allowing it to happen in the middle school, and then they get to high school,
Yeah.
and then you have to retrain them?
Yeah, I think what's great right now is that at the middle school, they, in some ways, while they really don't have them, and
Yeah.
so the way I look at it is the ninth graders are already coming to us, the eighth grade coming to us
Yeah.
as ninth graders. While they may be in their pocket, they're not necessarily using them, and so the way I'm framing it and rationalizing it to myself for next year is the ninth graders would already be trained, and we're just gonna retrain our 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what I would say is
Yes.
I love it, and I know Cora, like we meet as a team, and like when things can be in alignment.
Yeah.
The less
Exactly.
transitions our kids have to make, the
Yeah.
better. So I know I would be pushing to look closely at what the high school is doing.
Yeah, so.
And if there's, depending on what they decide, how can we align with them?
Yeah.
Then the next question comes is to Adam, and kind of in conjunction here, is like, how did you do that? Was it the teachers coming and pushing back to the parents, or was it the parents coming to the teachers? And so like, if the legislation isn't passed, who's doing what? Like, where is it
Good
coming
question.
from? Like, is it coming from the school, or is it coming from the parents? Or is it a combination of that?
We had a 7th and 8th grade phone-free environment for a year. So that would have been 2 school years ago, and it was really successful. Students put their phones in their lockers, and the administration saw how successful that was, and I think made the determination that they wanted to move forward. They got, we as a faculty voted in support of that move, and then that's when we communicated to community and students. And so it sort of started, I think, more with our administrative team. And I don't know if that answers your question fully, but that's sort of how it happened in our
So
district.
yours, it came from the administrative and not from the parents?
Yeah, it didn't come from the parents as much, and we used the community conversations to inform them of the why, and I think the why was really important. We had a really good like data page where it was like things like, there was a teacher, and I don't remember what state it was in. She had her students put their phones on a desk, on a table, and that whole class block, they did a tally of how many notifications went off in that block, and it was like, 500 plus, and it was like there was this chart paper full, that like things like that, and then just like lots of statistics, and I think that was really convincing,
That's great.
and that was helpful.
Yeah, we've read a study, there's a study out that shows that even in adults, if your phone is next to you, your cognitive abilities decrease significantly,
Yeah.
even if it's just sitting there off.
Yes, totally. Yeah, one more question
Yeah, I was
and then
just
we'll
wondering,
wrap up.
in terms of like, so this was a great presentation, and, really good. So now we want to do something about it.
Yeah.
I was gonna just make a suggestion, so I'm not sure where the legislation's at, but in terms of, you have all our emails now, if you would send the email addresses of our legislators, our senators, and our House people. I mean, what I always hear from legislators, if it says constituent, and I get more than 3, I pay attention.
Nice, yeah.
And so we could all write our legislators. You could also include all the school board, I see Mia's here, but we could all write. Oh, good. Sorry. And we could all write the school board members.
Yeah.
But I just think the more people that are writing their legislators saying, we want this, the more you're gonna have success. So
Yeah.
maybe if you email us those addresses.
That's
then
why
we
we
can
had
get
you
them on the
sign
phone.
in.
Yeah.
But that's just to keep some momentum up, because you're doing,
Thank
this is
you.
a great job. You really
Thanks
did a
so
great
much.
job here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And let's give applause to our panel. They each told me, or no, not Adam, because he's a teacher and we're fine talking to Adam, but I'm like, oh, this is pushing my edge a little. I'm a little nervous. So it's just a testament to how much they care about this. And so a really quick update. The bill is the Phone and Social Media Free Schools Bill. They're identical versions, S21 in the Senate and H54 in the House. They're both sitting in their chamber's Committee on Education. And the lead sponsor is Representative Angela Arsenault in the House and Terry Williams in the Senate. He's a Republican, she's a Democrat. There's 50 co-sponsors for the House bill.
Josh is one.
And Josh is one of them. But I've heard it's pretty split, Republican and Democrat. What a time for a bill we can all get together on. And so it's sitting there in the House Education Committee. I have to say, when she read it to them, body language, I was not seeing a lot of enthusiasm. Unfortunately, Kate McCann, our rep from Montpelier, is a teacher voice, and she's not in favor of it. She says students need their phones to set reminders or to get Vermont alerts about road closures. I'm thinking of the fight or flight, like they don't need to know about a car accident on Route 2, you need to take. She makes a lot of great points of how cell phones can be tools, the thing is, we don't need their personal devices to be tools, right? You can have a classroom Chromebook to write your reminders in, right? Or
Send emails.
send emails, or a classroom tablet to take pictures. I work with English language learners, and we can have a classroom tablet be their Google Translate without them getting notifications on their phone and distracting them. But so Kate hasn't come around yet. I'm meeting with her tomorrow morning. She's open to conversation. She said reach out to her. And I will say that Vermont NEA, the teachers union, is fully behind this. 83% of their members said they want this policy. And I know people are worried about teacher morale and attrition. It's a hard job. Take the nag roll off of them so they can just smile and be with the kids. So I will follow up and I'll send you an email with the link to the website and action steps for being in discussion with your legislators. Thanks so much for being part of it, and thanks for coming out.
Thank you.